I ask unanimous consent that the chair be authorized to declare a recess at any time without objection so ordered. I want to welcome everyone to this hearing of the Military Personnel Subcommittee. Today's hearing is focused on the personnel policymakers who are charged with developing the policies, guidance, and programs that affect the strategic objectives for accessions, recruitment and assignments, benefits, career development, and much more. That is to say, you are largely responsible for developing the tools that shape the total force in each of your services. This is no small task. We are here to hear from you on the effectiveness and consequences of all of these policies, which makes what we are going to discuss here today so important. First and foremost, I wanted to congratulate all of you on the turnaround in recruiting. This is a testament to the hard work and focus that the services, the recruiters on the ground, this committee, and the administration have invested in making sure we are a fully manned, lethal, and ready force. However, with the danger from China increasing, we need to make sure we keep our focus. I also wanted to hear from you how the implementation of the fiscal year 25 NDAA quality of life provisions are going. Are the dining facilities getting better? Are you doing a better job at making sure our service members and families have access to safe and affordable housing? Are service members seeing doctors they need to see in a timely manner and getting their prescriptions filled? Do our military children have access to quality child care? Are military spouses gainfully employed and pursuing careers they want? These are just some of the questions I hope we can answer today. Because if we don't ensure that our service members and their families are prioritized, our excellent recruiting will dry up and we may very well have retention problems. I want to thank all of our service members, active duty, reservists, and Guard members who are serving our great nation around the world as we speak. You and your families are really the subject of this hearing, as the policies and regulations controlled by these senior officers profoundly affect your lives and your very decisions to stay in the service. I would now like to welcome our witnesses, Lieutenant General Brian Eifler, United States Army Deputy Chief of Staff, and Vice Admiral Richard Cheeseman, United States Navy Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Personnel. Admiral Cheeseman, I know this is your last hearing. I want to thank you for your dedicated service to the Navy. I know you've made the Navy a stronger, more lethal fighting force as CMP, and your replacement will have big shoes to fill. Lieutenant General Caroline Miller, United States Air Force, Deputy Chief of Staff for Manpower and Personnel, and Lieutenant General Michael Borgschulte, United States Marine Corps, Deputy Commandant, Manpower and Reserve Affairs. Ms. Katharine Kelley, Deputy Chief of Space Operations for Human Capital. Before hearing from our witnesses, let me offer Ranking Member Houlihan an opportunity to make any opening remarks.
Thank you. I really appreciate you being here today so that we can have this conversation. And thank you very much to all of you all. It was a pleasure to talk to you earlier this week, or actually last week on the phone. I look forward to the conversation with you too. Without soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and guardians, we can't man military weapon systems, deliver humanitarian assistance, or effectively respond to security challenges around the globe. And yet, the declining propensity for military service among America's youth is a cause for deep concern for me. I come from a military family where several generations, including myself, opted to serve, but that exposure to a military lifestyle is decreasing across our nation, and parents and teachers and counselors and coaches are less and less likely and willing to recommend military service to young people in their spheres of influence. This is compounded by the fact that, according to Blue Star Family's 2024 Military Family Lifestyle Survey, only 32% of active duty families would actually recommend military service to a young family member. I'm also concerned that we might have instituted unintended barriers to service that may be preventing those who are willing to serve from joining the military. So I'd like to partner with my colleagues and services to identify ways that we can actually widen the pool of applicants from which we draw our all-volunteer force. I'm interested in how the Army and the Navy's prep programs, which help potential recruits overcome physical fitness or academic barriers, might expand the pool of applicants. It will be important to understand the long-term impact of these kinds of efforts on first-term attrition and retention. We have seen awe-inspiring technological advances in these last 50 years, which suggest that the jobs of the military must evolve to meet the future fight. That's why I also want to hear from you in the services, and particularly from the Navy, about examples of new occupational specialties that might help our military keep their tactical edge in warfighting. We ask a lot of our service members. We ask them to risk their lives to protect our country, and in turn, we must make sure that we have their backs in support of them and their families. And I'm afraid that we don't always live up to that, and we need to do better. So that it's imperative that we continue to work, as we started in the last year's bipartisan quality of life panel, to evolve and improve the quality of life. The fiscal year 25 NDAA included several of the recommendations made by that panel, but there still is room for improvement and work to be done in areas such as food insecurity, housing, childcare, and access to health care. The soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and guardians who serve us today have different needs than they did in the past. Women serving have increased to over 17% of the force, and nearly a third of our active duty service members have children. More than ever, the military must be able to provide service members with affordable and convenient child care. However, child care staffing shortages have resulted in untenable wait lists that negatively impact unit readiness across the force. Moreover, we must not lose sight of the impact that current events have had on our military. It does seem like every other day, and sometimes every day, we're hearing about another scandal out of the Pentagon, and I'm really concerned about how these stories might be affecting the morale of the force. It is also true that there are a series of recent changes in personnel policy, which could potentially sideline exceptional men and women who are currently serving as well. All of these events, including the indiscriminate attacks on the Department of Defense civilians, could have lasting effects on the military and likely negative effects. What we should be doing is working together to foster a culture that encourages and rewards excellence, creativity, innovation, and critical thinking so that our military can continue to meet the emerging challenges around the globe. As our military has grown more diverse and more inclusive, it has increasingly reflected our nation, and our lethality remains as strong as it ever has been. It's a false choice to say that we have to choose between acknowledging diversity and building an effective and formidable military. As I mentioned earlier, and with many of you on our one-on-one calls, I'm very concerned about this administration's assault on our federal civil service, which threatens the essential support programs for military families and the partnership between military and civilian personnel across our military. Bureaucratic delays and incompetence in implementing these flawed personnel policies, to include chaos over exemptions and hiring freezes, have left military personnel sometimes with 2 or 3 jobs while positions are being reviewed for exemption or from hiring freezes. And it makes no sense that civilian employees spend months and months, that the DoD spends months and months hiring, are now being sent home in droves without really any logical rhyme or reason. So I'd really love to hear from you all about the impacts that these actions against civilians might be having, again, to morale or to retention. My notes say Mr. Chairman, but my eyes say no. Madam Chairman, thank you very much for having this hearing today so that we can discuss the importance of personnel policy on the lives of our service members. And thank you again to our witnesses for being here, again, especially to Vice Admiral Cheeseman on his last testimony before retirement. I am jealous. I yield the balance of my time, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Houlihan. And each witness will have the opportunity to present his or her testimony, and each member will have an opportunity to question the witnesses for 5 minutes. We respectfully ask the witnesses to summarize their testimony in 5 minutes or less. Your written comments and statements will be made part of the hearing record. With that, Lieutenant General Eifler, you may make your opening statement.
Thanks, Madam Chair, Ranking Member Houlihan, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. It's an honor to represent the more than 948,000 soldiers, 200,000 Army civilians and their families, all part of the most powerful Army on the planet. The Army stands ready to defend our nation as part of a joint force. With more than 109,000 soldiers currently deployed across the globe, our Army is lethal, cohesive, and ready. We are proud but not satisfied. Thus, the Army is transforming its organizations and delivering technology to keep up with the evolving battlefield. Continually transforming means the Army is more adaptable, flexible, and lethal. The Army is moving forward under 4 focus areas that directly address an increasingly volatile world. These pillars are warfighting, delivering ready combat formations, undergoing continuous transformation, and strengthening the profession. Within these 4 pillars, our team of professionals will execute all human resource actions that directly support our most important asset, our people. Under this framework, the goal is to improve, streamline, and renovate how we do things in the HR community to be faster and more efficient. Our readiness for the large-scale combat operations depends on it. As an example, we will focus on the overhaul and revamping of our retention processes as well. This will ensure quality over quantity and provide leaders the right skills for our formations. The Army remains committed to quality of life initiatives to ensure our soldiers remain focused on their missions. Barracks renovations and modernization efforts are correcting outdated housing. Dining facilities are being updated to provide more flexible and nutritious options. The Holistic Health and Fitness Program, or H2F, embeds experts directly into units to ensure peak performance. Recruiting will remain a priority. The Army exceeded its FY24 goal with over 55,000 new soldiers and is targeting 61,000 this year. We are currently on glide path to surpass our goal without lowering standards. With congressional support, we will keep the Army on a sustainable, strategic path as we transform for the future. We will deliver ready combat formations with the grit and advanced capabilities required to defend our nation and its interest. As we celebrate our 250th anniversary this year, I thank you for your unwavering support of our talented soldiers, civilian professionals, and their families.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant General Eifler. And now, Vice Admiral Cheeseman, we offer 5 minutes to you to make an opening statement.
Chair Kiggins, Ranking Member Houlihan, and distinguished subcommittee members, thank you for the opportunity to testify today, representing the incredible sailors and families of our United States Navy. Supporting me today is my senior enlisted advisor, Fleet Master Chief Delbert Terrell, who provides wise counsel on all issues, whether officer, enlisted, or civilian. It is those sailors and civilians that we both serve who are on duty around the clock and around the globe, a lethal fighting force working to deter aggression, particularly in the Red Sea, Eastern Mediterranean, and Western Pacific. Continuing Resolution 25 funds a thorough, strategy-driven Navy budget that is focused on delivering resources to ensure our naval forces remain ready, resilient, and agile to execute national tasking and preserve peace through strength. I thank you for your support within CR 25 that helps Navy's recruiting and retention efforts, as well as our quality of service initiatives writ large. They are making a difference, and I encourage continued congressional support in these areas for FY26 and beyond. Navy recruiters had a historic 2024, contracting more sailors than in any given year since 2003. We exceeded our increased contracting goal by implementing real-time data-informed processes, capitalizing on the Future Sailor Prep Course, streamlining medical waiver reviews, increasing the quality and number of recruiters, and identifying and removing barriers to recruiter productivity. As a result, we are on pace to exceed our FY25 recruiting goal of 40,600 future sailors. I remain focused on ensuring our schoolhouse supply chain is ready to receive this influx of motivated students, and we are ensuring every future sailor receives the training they need to be ready on day one in a fiscally responsible, efficient, and effective manner. Additionally, we continue to exceed retention forecasts across all zones, in part due to consistent congressional support in funding sailor special incentive pays and bonuses. Sea duty manning is an essential element of operational readiness, and I know our chronic shortfalls impact job satisfaction and retention. We are driving barrier removal across the enterprise, and we can now predict a steady drop in gaps at sea over the next 18 months. My goal remains achieving 100% rating fill by 2027. Our sailors, civilians, and their families are the backbone of our Navy. It is our duty to take care of them by delivering the highest standards of quality of service. We must build great people, great leaders, and great teams to innovate, solve hard problems, and dominate in combat. Our sailors stand ready as a lethal fighting force to deter or confront any adversary. You and every American can be proud of your Navy and this team. It is a privilege to serve, and I sincerely thank all the members of this subcommittee and the staff for your past, present, and future support. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Vice Admiral Cheeseman. And with that, Lieutenant General Borgschulte, you may make your opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair Keegans, Ranking Member Houlihan, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. It is an honor to appear before you today to discuss your Marine Corps. Marines take great pride in the fact that the strength of our Corps, the most important weapon system, is the individual Marine. That tough, smart, gritty Marine that's ready to close with and destroy the enemy. Today, your Marine Corps has over 30,000 of those Marines deployed operationally in 35 different countries across the globe. These Marines support our nation's campaigning efforts, underpin deterrence under the banner of peace through strength, and stand ready to respond when our nation calls upon us. The Marine Corps approaches the challenges of this critical manpower portfolio with a singular focus, and that's delivering combat-ready, lethal forces to operational units wherever they are needed. Every decision we make, whether that's recruiting, whether that's retention, assignment, or policy, is evaluated through this lens of lethality, as it should be. Now, sustaining this high state of warfighting readiness depends entirely on our ability to recruit and retain lethal warriors. I'm pleased to report that we continue to win on the recruiting front, and the Marine Corps will make mission again this year. We will make mission with exceeding all DoD quality standards, without lowering and without ever compromising those standards that you expect of us and that define the Marine Corps. We believe our disciplined culture of warfighting ethos and the high standards that we carry attract that competitive, young American, high-performing American that have what it takes to earn the title of United States Marine. And this is why our retention of Marines has also reached historic heights. This year, we've exceeded last year's unprecedented numbers, and in the first 3 months, in March here, we surpassed 100% of our retention goals for this year. But we're not stopping here. We're continuing to drive. This marks the highest number and the highest quality through metrics of retained Marines in a decade, and proves that Marines that once they earn that title Marine, they want to stay Marine, and that they are proud to protect and defend the nation that we all love so much. I'd also like to thank you, each of you, for your unwavering support, providing the services which the tools that we need to carry on these successes. And that's in the form of financial incentives, quality of life initiatives, school access for our recruiters, family support programs like CDCs and such, and many, many more that keep a Marine in the Marine Corps, stay in Marine, or make a difference when a young American decides to come into the Marine Corps. Now, I'd like to throw out a challenge that I did a couple weeks ago in the SASC to you, and that is that if you have sons or daughters or family or friends that you think have what it takes to be a Marine, I've got a list, I got a bunch of contact cards right here if you're up for the challenge, and I'll give them to you after testimony. But after all this success talk, I must stress this: we cannot stop here. The momentum each service is highlighting, the fantastic things that all the services are doing right now, that remains very fragile. The force depends not only on the resources, but on something more enduring, and that's the value of military service. Our nation must reawaken a sense of purpose around serving, around being part of something bigger than self. Together, we must restore the value of service in the eyes of our fellow citizens. We must not just talk about, we must talk about the positive impacts of service, and not just the negative issues in our national narrative. In closing, I would ask that we all commit to attacking each key decision through the lens of lethality and warfighting excellence. Our Marines and our nation are counting on it. I look forward to your questions. Semper Fidelis.
Thank you very much. And last, we have Lieutenant General Miller. You may now make your opening statement. Oh, I'm sorry, that Ms. Kelley.
Madam Chair Kiggins, Ranking Member Houlihan, and distinguished members of this subcommittee, I am honored to have this opportunity to appear before you with my fellow service personnel colleagues. The Department of the Air Force is committed to ensuring we are postured to deter and, if necessary, prevail against our sophisticated peer competitors, including China and Russia. As the department looks to the future, readiness continues to be the foundation of our mission success. Readiness can be assessed through multiple lenses, but our most significant competitive advantage is our people, our airmen. This year, we continue to focus on recruiting, developing, and retaining skilled and innovative individuals, ensuring they are equipped with essential operational skills and resources. Fiscal year 2024 saw improvements in recruiting due to an increase in recruiting manning, changes to training processes, and an increase in the delayed entry program to its highest level in 10 years. The department is also improving pilot retention through increased accessions and training using monetary and non-monetary authorities granted by Congress. Readiness is directly linked to the welfare of our airmen and their families, and so we continue to target barriers to well-being and overall force readiness in areas such as economic security, access to quality child care, sexual assault and sexual harassment prevention, and suicide prevention. Efforts to reduce financial stress include training through programs such as Personnel Financial Readiness and Direct Financial Assistance authorized by the fiscal year 2025 NDAA. We remain committed to improving access to available, affordable, and quality child care programs by continuing to invest in our child care providers and programs such as community-based child care fee assistance. To bolster sexual assault and sexual harassment response and prevention, we have implemented policies to establish standards for care providers to ensure accountability and facilitate inter-office collaboration. The department has codified the DoD suicide response system and implemented a post-vention command support team. They deliver leader-focused training designed to implement rapid response activities following a suicide event to minimize suicide contagion, facilitate individual and unit cohesion, and reduce negative impacts on force readiness. Talent management remains the cornerstone of our efforts to build and develop the force we need. Our talent management philosophy is based on high standards, accountability, and meritocracy. Each airman's record is evaluated on its own merit, specifically in terms of job performance, demonstrated skills, and warfighting readiness. To improve readiness, the department is focused on developing specialized skills to solve operational and strategic challenges. As the Department of the Air Force looks to the future to preserve our supremacy against adversaries, I assure you the Air Force leadership is wholly focused on maximizing readiness and lethality while caring for our force. Thank you for your continued partnership and advocacy of the United States Air Force. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. And with that, our last opening statement from Ms. Kelley.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman Keegan and Ranking Member Houlihan and distinguished members of this subcommittee. I sit before you today on behalf of the United States Space Force in an environment where strategic competition in space presents a serious threat to national security. Our mission in the Space Force is clear: to secure our nation's interests in, from, and to space. And this mission is achievable because of the incredible men and women who are guardians in the United States Space Force, and I'm proud to represent them here with you today. As the newest branch of the armed services with a fiercely contested domain, we must recruit and retain the very best talent. I'm very proud to share that the Space Force has exceeded its fiscal year 24 enlisted recruiting goal by 4% and is on track to meet our 2025 recruitment goals as well. And furthermore, Guardian retention is an all-time high of 96% today, with a goal of landing at 92% by the end of this year. We're very proud of our Guardians who are willing to join and stay. To ensure the long-term pipeline of Guardians, last year we established our own recruiting squadron, and we're also leveraging technology and new marketing platforms to reach individuals with the specific talents, the technological talents, that our service in particular needs. For example, this Friday on National Space Day, we will be premiering a show to introduce the United States Space Force at planetarium audiences across the country. Building the force America needs requires continued growth and investment in our space professionals. We are developing Guardians with the foundational skills and experiences needed in this dynamic and lethal security environment. And at every step, the Space Force is ensuring the warrior ethos is the nucleus of our service, and our lean civilian workforce is aligned to critical functions in direct support of warfighter readiness. As our Guardians are concentrated on the mission, we are keenly focused on readiness and their quality of life with the spectrum of resources from our Guardian resilience teams to spouse employment initiatives, to name a few. And among our top priorities is access to childcare, quality childcare, as this is especially crucial for those Guardians who provide 24/7 operational support to the joint fight, on duty around the clock, directly supporting those who deployed around the world. Thanks to the continued partnership of this committee, this past year we made significant progress in consolidating space expertise from across the Department of Defense. We opened the first application window for reserve professionals to transfer into the Space Force, and more than 300 are projected to transfer in 2025, with more interest to join than we had spaces to fill. I want to thank you for your flexible service options provided to us in the Personnel Management Act, which will integrate active, reserve, and guard components into a unified service with both full and part-time work roles in one service without separate component. The Space Force is unique from other services in this way, and that particular flexibility is key to attracting and retaining the talent necessary to counter the increasing threats to our national security. Madam Chairwoman and Ranking Member Houlihan and distinguished members of this committee, thank you again for the opportunity to represent our Space Force Guardians and to be here with you today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kelley. With that, we'll move to questions. I will start. Let's see, with last year's NDA, it was particularly focused, as we know, on our quality of life issues, on pay and compensation, on housing, on child care, on health care, on spouse employment. So in your discussions with service members, what is the sense of their view of how these reforms are helping? Are they actually feeling them? I know I've gone to some community events in Hampton Roads and my district in Virginia Beach and have had junior enlisted people come up to me and thank me for their pay raise, which is very nice, considering there's, I'm sure, a lot of things they would like to complain about as well. But so just to hear that firsthand has been very meaningful. And where do you see that we've had the most improvement, and what are the services doing to aid service members and their families, and what else should we be doing? How are we getting that word out that we've put these meaningful changes in place? I just want to make sure that people are actually feeling that and that you're hearing that. So if you could maybe each take a minute or two to explain.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think this is one of those topics that we can't ever take our foot off the gas on, quite honestly. We do have to balance quality of life with readiness. Where do we invest in our money that we put in all the programs, as well as preparing for combat? And I think that's always an intense balance, and we'll look at that all the time. I think there's been some great progress made. I don't think we're satisfied, as I said in my opening statement. I think we've got some work to do. Barracks has always been a problem, and we're continuing to work on that. And that's a big bill. We know that. So trying to spend money properly and efficiently in accordance with our structure, that's very helpful. So we're making progress. I personally saw it firsthand up in Alaska in the 11th Airborne Division. We built the largest CDC in DOD. But we get challenged with manning that, and having, only about 84% manned across the CDCs. We still need to add the incentives, even more than what we've already added, to get the workers there, just like the assistants with bringing their children in where they can get it free and their second one, 50% off basically. Those type of incentives we got to keep working on. And I think as well as housing, I think having outside inspectors come in that we're doing this year, all through CONUS and OCONUS, to make sure we're meeting the standards, to make sure our soldiers and families are living in better conditions. I think we got to continue to work on that.
Thank you.
Congresswoman, thanks for the question. To your point about the 10% pay raise, it is most welcomed. I've heard the same thing from sailors. They enjoy the extra money. I would like to say, though, that was funded for FY25 and 25 only. We need to make sure that we pass a budget on time on October 1st, or that becomes a bill to the services, and we will have to make choices in special incentive pays in other places so we can meet payroll. So a combined effort there to do that on time and not get into a CR in 26 will be most helpful. That said, I think the overwhelming thought from sailors is it's a good start, right? So for all these quality of service initiatives, I know in my portfolio they're very appreciative of the fact that we've made policy where no sailor has to go into a yard period for more than 2 years at a time, no first-term sailor, so they can be operational. And those first-term sailors that are in yard maintenance get TAD opportunities to get to sea, so they can learn their trade and learn their craft. In addition, as you know, we've increased access to medical care in the Hampton Roads area, in the Newport News area. We've taken a strategic view on housing. We've taken a strategic view on parking and Wi-Fi. So all the things have been very helpful for our sailors, ma'am.
Good. Thank you.
Well, ma'am, again, thanks for the question. Like my other colleagues have mentioned, quality of life equals retention, which equals lethality and warfighting. I mean, just quite simply. I mean, like I said in my opening comments, the strength, every service, we champion this often, is that the strength of the Marine Corps is the individual Marine. And so retaining that Marine after you've trained them and you've gotten them to this high level of warfighting, capability, you want to retain them. And so how you do that? As they get a little bit older, they have families, and so you retain the family. So I'll just highlight a couple of things that I think that I've heard that are very important. Having been in command here not too long ago, was childcare, the CDCs, right? So I think all the services we all wrestle with, it is expensive. In the Marine Corps, what we're doing, our wait lists are down. We still have a wait list, but we are down. 40% of our child care workers are military spouses, which is fantastic. Thank you for your help in allowing the credentialing to be much easier as you move from, say, Virginia to California. That credential, you don't have to re-credential. That was a huge barrier. We've increased the pay. I think all the services have. We increased the pay for our direct child care workers. And then we're building 5 new CDCs, which we're excited about. My wife, my spouse works. She has a career, demanding career. And that has been a retention effort for us. We have had our kids, we had a couple of little monkeys, and they have been in these CDCs their whole lives. And they're world class. They're better than out in town. So really just very much appreciative of that. And that has allowed both of us to work at this level. So we have 30,000 other kids in child care, another 10,000 in school age programs. So those are other parents that are staying in the Marine Corps because their kids are taken care of. So really just appreciate it. So that's point number one. I could go on and on about the child care facilities. Big fan. Barracks. We can't put enough money in the barracks. So our commandant, this commandant, has put his money where his mouth is and put money into barracks. And we've got to. And it's expensive. It is a big bill with a B, a lot of Bs. And that's challenging, right? So what we tried to do was show our Marines something right away because, building a new barracks takes years. So we have those plans. However, what can we do now to refurbish them? We actually have a program, Operation Clean Sweep, that we start on the West Coast where Marines can actually fix their barracks. We'll provide them some funds. Hey, they can fix some things. You punch the wall, I can drywall. And so they'll fix some of those things that they shouldn't be punching the wall. But if they do, we'll drywall it over. But just a couple points. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. I mean, I think quality of life over the focus for the last year has been phenomenal. You see all of the services, the recruiting numbers are going up. About 2 years ago, it was all the narrative out in the press was, if you come into the services, you're going to be raped. You've got this terrible, living conditions, no schools for your children and everything. But so I think that we've turned the corner on a lot of that. Similar to my colleagues here, the CDCs, huge improvements over the last 2 years. A lot of that had to do with the ability to incentivize our care workers, our direct care providers. Initially, it was just that, each of the direct care providers would get 100% on their first child, and then we expanded that to the second one. And then we expanded it to everybody that worked in the CDC, so not only the direct care providers, but those that were running it, those that were doing training. So that was a very big win. We need to continue to focus on that. We see a little bit of a decline with the hiring freeze. We have worked collectively with OPM and OSD to make sure that we can continue the flow of hiring the child care providers and everybody in the NAF. So that will continue on. I will also emphasize the fact that the ease in which we can have spouses go from one organization to another is so helpful. You do recruit the individual, but you retain the family. And we have said that for a couple years, but that's very true. When you get an assignment, the first thing you do, especially if you have a spouse and children, is you look at the schools, you look at where you're going to live, and you look at whether or not your spouse, if they're working, will be able to be employed. And that is all improved. As my colleagues have stated, the dorms, barracks, they need some work, and we have been focusing on that a little bit. But we want to make sure that we have good living conditions for our airmen. as they come into the service. And so overall, I think the quality of life is good. We will continue to focus on that area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, I'll add two things that are somewhat unique to the Space Force, although I completely agree with my colleagues in their preceding comments. From the space perspective, the child care concerns are about having child care 24/7 for some of our Guardian operators. So one of the things that we need to continue to work on is making sure that they have an understanding of the multitude of programs that are out there that aren't just the traditional brick and mortar CDC from early in the morning to a normal day, but the things that actually support them throughout the evening and on weekends and in shift work, which a fairly sizable portion of our Guardians are in. So we work very hard to make sure that those ancillary programs that are in support are available to them, and more importantly, that they understand them and know how to access them. I think there's been great progress, but I would definitely advocate that we need to do more work on that. The second thing that for the Space Force, given some of the unique skill sets that we have, almost exclusively cyber, intel, space, and acquisition, all of which are critical, we know we're head-to-head against industry in those areas. And so incentive pays like assignment incentive pay or special duty assignment pay tied to the location or the expectation of the job, and tying those incentives to credentialing, which is the way that the technical side of private sector validates the technical credibility of those individuals. We're really focused on leveraging those flexibilities that you have given us. The junior enlisted pay raise obviously has been super helpful. I would echo Admiral Cheeseman's comments about making sure that that stays funded in the future, because it's absolutely critical for our junior Guardians as well. And thank you for the question.
Thank you, and I'm way over time, so I apologize to my colleagues. But just in wrap up, and thank you, that was really helpful, and I know that Congresswoman Houlihan cared, and Congresswoman Jacobs and all of us who sat on the Quality of Life panel really appreciate and are interested in these updates. We need a PR campaign. I know I traveled around with the books, the Quality of Life books in my trunk of my car, and every time I ran into something, I'm like, oh, look at all the great things we're doing, that we're trying to take care of our military families. But getting that word out is so important, and the housing, the barracks is a passion project, I think, for all of us, so we'll continue to work on that. I think one last comment that I think we left out a little bit in our quality of life work was, you all mentioned child care and families, and you know, that's how we retain people, but the moving piece and how frequently we're moving people, I don't feel like we spend enough time talking. It's an expense, number one, but I mean, you talk about the impact of especially the people who have kids and when your spouses have jobs and whatnot. I mean, that movement piece, and I just, can we just, I ask that we reevaluate that sometimes. Do we really need to move? I understand the career progression and what that looks like for being stationed in different places, but I know how it felt when we were a military family. So when we moved around a lot, and then when we were able to stay for the last few years and our kids were getting older especially, and what that meant and how that set them up for success. And the impact it had on our decision, and I'm sure every military family's decision to stay or to leave the service. So I just ask that we put some more thought into that piece. And with that, I apologize. I'll yield to my ranking member.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Can you guys hear me okay? I don't know why we're organized this way, but I feel like I'm perched up here. But as I mentioned during my opening remarks, I'm really concerned about what's going on with our civilian personnel at DOD. Many of you I spoke to, I shared that my experience when I served active duty was that probably at least 1-to-1 ratio of uniform to civilian. I think that we talked about the fact that it was, you wanted to say 50%, more than 50% in the Air Force as an example. So this means as we are giving people fork in the road decisions or potentially riffing them at the civilians, we're necessarily asking more of those who are in uniform, who are left behind, and we probably have very little expectation or understanding whether those positions will be retained or backfilled. So I'd love to be able to hear from each of you whether or not you're hearing whether service members are being asked to pick up additional duties created by these vacancies and what the impact has been on readiness and morale. General Eifler, it looks like you're
Thanks,
interested.
Ranking Member. Hey, I appreciate that question, the concern, and I probably speak for everybody here. The civilians maintain an important role for us, for our readiness, for our continuity. Don't want to underscore that enough. And so we continue to look at this. So with the DRP, with the delayed resignation program, we had about 16,000 sign up to do that, which is significant. We haven't had to cut anybody. And so right now we're in the analysis of looking at, okay, what's the impact? Because like you indicated, we don't want to impact on readiness or the mission. And so right now we're in the middle of reorganizing and seeing, like I said in the open statement, streamlining where are we having holes or gaps or things that we're falling through. We haven't had to make any cuts yet, and so we're still looking at, okay, is there an impact? Because we are doing some reorganization because of that, and that's something we're looking closely at to make sure we don't have a gap in our coverage as far as the mission's concerned.
How is it possible that there can't be an impact when you're talking about 18,000 people who have voluntarily or otherwise decided not to serve any longer or are not able to serve any longer?
Yeah, and I think that's what we're looking at, because if we can reorganize, we do. If we can combine some similarities between some of our organizations, I know that we're doing that inside of the Army G1 to see what that's going to look like. And since those thousands haven't left yet, we still have some time to sort of figure that out. And I think internally as a staff and with the Army staff, we're briefing back in the next couple of weeks, okay, how we reorganize, where are the gaps, so we can say, hey, we need to backfill this person or this position to make sure we're not missing any of the missions. So I mean, there are some concerns out there as well.
Thank you.
From the civilian.
Admiral.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for the question. So similar answer to, as my Army counterpart. I don't have total visibility on the entire Department of the Navy. That portfolio is not in my or that piece is not in my portfolio. But in my own enterprise, about 10% of our folks took the DRP. So to your point, there will be an impact. We just don't know what it is as we look at potential reorganization and how it will shake out. I can't do my job without my 3-star civilian equivalent deputy. It's important. She did not take the DRP. Good for me. But I am very concerned about my force development pipeline, how it will affect the schoolhouses, and how it will affect our pay systems going forward, depending on how that shakes out. So we've done a lot of work in the last 2 years, in modernizing our pay systems. We're in a much better place. We are, as far as I'm concerned, the gold standard in getting pay transactions done and taking care of sailors. I don't want to see any impact at all, and we'll be paying attention to that to make sure we mitigate appropriately.
Thanks. And I know I won't have enough time, but I would like to follow up with you about that conversation that we also had about the fact that you don't have visibility, or you're not different than the other services, including the Marines. You don't have that direct connection to the civilian pipeline. And I think that's interesting and worthy of exploration.
It's managed at the secretariat level. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And General, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So our Marines are civilians. We call them civilian Marines. We don't call them civilians. We call them civilian Marines. I think some of you have heard of that, just because of that. These are dedicated professionals that 60% of them are veterans of our civilians. So, just key teammates. And I would argue that, the challenge that the Marine Corps has is it's got any civilian that we lose through DRP or termination or whatnot has an outsized impact on the Marine Corps. And here's why. Because we're more lean than any of DOD. We have a 9-to-1 ratio, 9 Marines to 1 civilian, and the rest of DOD is 2-to-1. So I had to ask when I got these numbers, what are we doing wrong? But that has an outsized impact as far as how many civilians. So losing 1 civilian. Our numbers are smaller. We have 1,600 approximately that took the DRP, which was a good deal for some of those individuals, and some were more senior, more experienced. So again, as we look at like the other services, we're looking at the impacts of what losing these individuals is, and then restructuring as appropriate to handle that challenge. And then some had exemptions, which was helpful too. Recruiting exemptions and things. Child care was exempted and such. But thank you for that question. Civilian Marines.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. And we talked a little bit about this at our phone call. But what I would say, we are same as my colleagues here, that we're looking at how to restructure. We're going to lose probably about 12,000. We're assessing that right now. So there is going to be an impact, but more importantly, I think, to the individuals, we're trying to do it all voluntarily. So they, we do not want to go down the RIF pathway. But I think what we all need to be concerned about is the impact that it's going to have on recruiting. If there is an uncertainty about coming into a service on whether or not you'll be able to maintain that position, that I think is going to impact. We have done tons of work over the last several years to really, express the goodness of our service, why we serve. It's for a bit different purpose, a bigger purpose. And, a lot of it is job security. We have education, all of the benefits that go along with being a warfighter. So I think that's, as we continue down this road for the next several years, or for, we just have to watch the second and third order impacts of how is that going to impact recruiting. Right now, we are not seeing any impacts at all, which is great. We have a lot on the military side, and on the recruiting side, on the civilian side, we are trying to get more people in as we can.
Thank you. And lastly, and I know I'm over time, Ms. Kelley.
Yes, thank you, ma'am, for giving me a few minutes. I would just offer this. The Space Force is in a very similar boat, arguably a smaller boat than the way that the Marines just described the problem. We're a third civilians of a total force of 17,000. So the impact of losing civilians is exponentially hard on the Space Force because of the outsized impact of the total population. We believe that through the voluntary reductions, we're going to lose somewhere around 10%. And so we have to look very carefully at how to mitigate that 10% and how to be very, very intentional about making sure that that does not have a direct mission impact. I will tell you, because we rely heavily upon the Air Force for support, and that the preponderance of our guardians, military and civilian, are operationally focused, this is going to be a challenge for us.
So I will yield back to the chairwoman, but it just is astounding to a person, woman and man, that you guys each said, well, we're going to have to figure it out. It just feels sort of ironic because it's like this fire, aim, ready kind of concept. We've literally, in some cases, are firing or removing people, and then we're figuring out what to do about it. I really appreciate the candor of your responses, and I yield.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Cisneros for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And if I could just say, it is a total force. Nearly a million of the DOD is about a million are civilian employees, and they play an essential role in the defense of this nation. But with that, I'd like to move on to a different topic. In 2021, there was the IRC on sexual harassment. They came forward with 82 recommendations, of which Secretary Austin at the time agreed to all 82 recommendations. I was sitting in the P&R chair at that time. We put forward the plan to institute those recommendations. Hiring a civilian workforce, professionalizing a lot of the collateral duties that the services had used around training, victim counseling, advisors to the command. $4.5 billion is what we asked Congress to fully fund this to implement this plan. And it was going to take about 7 years in total. But I would like to know how that plan is going right now and really how the hiring freeze is impacting getting to the full potential or the full professional workforce that you needed to mitigate sexual harassment. And we can start with you, General, there, and we'll just kind of work our way down.
Yes, sir. I'll try to save some time for my colleagues this time. Yes, I think that is something we are trying to implement fully. I think the hiring freeze has had an impact on some of those professionals that we're trying to bring in there. I think equally as important as a force that we have not gotten where we need to be on sexual assault prevention. And we're trying not to let that stymie us, because to me, and what I saw firsthand, is it's inside the force that we've got to make sure we're teaching the correct values. And when we bring people in, we're making sure that they absorb the values of who we are as a service for all the services. And so I think we still have to work on that, but we are implementing those, a lot of those. I remember they came and visited us up in Alaska. I had great discussions on that, of how to get forward and get after the prevention aspect. So I appreciate the support on that.
Congressman, thanks for the question. So similar answer, obviously. The hiring freeze is slowing down our ability to hire integrated primary prevention workforce right now. Other than that, we are essentially on plan. To your point about the 7-year plan, our culture efforts over recent years, as we're building culture founded on respect and trust, we have seen a drop in destructive behaviors over time. So we're confident we're going in the right direction, but the hiring freeze is slowing us down as far as the integrated primary prevention workforce.
Yes, sir. Good to see you again. The Marine Corps has fully embraced the IRC recommendations. Our number was approximately 400 of the SAPR workforce, 385 to be exact. About half of those are hired. The hiring freeze is impacting it. So what we're doing about that is we're asking for relatively new, but we're asking for individual exemptions to fill those positions, I'm sure like the other services. And then we have another internal process, which is our MCTIF. I know you've heard about this, the Marine Corps Total Fitness, which is giving resilience to those Marines before, the SAPR workforce helping with that, but also, post the event. We're trying to get to the left of that and prevent that. So we're pretty excited about kicking off the Marine Corps Total Fitness. We kicked it off. It's just, again, funding and then getting that in place, which would be more prevention-based and giving Marines resiliency and all those destructive behaviors, not just this, but all of them. So thanks for that.
Yes, sir. From the Air Force, we leaned really heavily in on this from the start. So we still have more vacancies that we're working through. However, we have not stopped any of our sexual prevention training programs. We did continue on with that, even though we looked through all of that to make sure we are in compliance with the EO as far as the training material. The other thing that we did a few years ago, we did a test on integrating our prevention services in one organization or in one facility, which was very successful. We did that in 7 different installations, and we continue to do that in other installations as we go forward, because what we found was that there was a synergy there with our preventive workforce, all in one. You've got your sexual assault, your all the other ones, suicide prevention, everybody there. So it was not only helpful for the individuals that were coming in because they would have sort of one intake and then they wouldn't have to retell their stories multiple times because we would get them to the right provider. So we found success with the victims, and we also found success with the workforce because they had other providers to lean on. So we continue to do that, and then we are also, similar to the Marines, we're doing exemptions for the vacancies that we have.
Sir, good to see you again. From the Space Force perspective, we have Guardian resilience teams that are in place. We do have to make sure that the civilian hiring impacts don't mitigate on their ability to create that environment to handle anything that is an intake issue. I would say we have to continue to work that. The IRC recommendations are continuing to implement, but we've certainly got more work to do to make sure that the hiring impacts don't have a negative fallback intent.
Right. I'm sure you all agree this is a huge impact to good order and discipline, right? Sexual assault in the ranks. And I know it's nothing that any of you would suggest continue, and I know you are working there, but I hope you go to your bosses, including all the way up to the secretary, and letting them know the impact of this hiring freeze, the impact of any possible cuts and what that'll have. And the thing I worry about with the Secretary Hegseth's negativity really kind of towards women in the military is that sends a different message, and that, if this continues, right, if the hiring freeze continues, if the lack of funding continues, if they pull away funding and it takes longer and longer to implement this, they're just going to say it failed and it didn't work. And if that happens, it's because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. So I need you all to kind of work on this issue and push it, and to make sure that we get it done for the quality of life of our service members. Nobody would ever stand this for any company anywhere out there. So we shouldn't stand for it in the military at all. I wish I had an hour and a half to ask my questions, but I'm sorry. I think I might have missed some of you before this. I think we had a couple schedules just didn't work, but we'll reach out, and we'd love to get some time with all of you to kind of sit down and talk about the various issues that I believe are important to me and important to you as well. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Cisneros. And just as a side note too, I certainly agree and recognize the importance of the civilian workforce piece and share some of the concerns. So I would just say we've had to pick up the phone more than once and just communicate, what the impact that some of these cuts have. So please use your member of Congress in your district, or probably any of us, but I think we can smooth the process sometimes. So, and that's what we're here to do, because we do not want that to impact your readiness, your mission, and your lethality. So thank you. And with that, I recognize Ms. Jacobs for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here. Admiral Cheeseman, congratulations on your upcoming retirement. Thank you for all of your amazing work on behalf of the sailors in San Diego and across the country. As we've mentioned a lot, the Military Quality of Life panel last term, we were able to get a lot of really important things in a bipartisan way, and I hope we can continue that. One of the things I was really proud of was our provision to require DoD to update their child care provider compensation model, which hadn't been updated in 30 years. And Admiral Cheeseman, while I know technically child care isn't in your portfolio, I was a little disappointed that it wasn't in your written testimony at all. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about childcare as a quality of life issue and how you're measuring the impact of childcare on service member quality of life and military readiness.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for the question. The absence in my written statement has nothing to do with the importance of this issue. First and foremost, specific to the child care issues you talked about, we have increased the overall pay scale. So that's helping. In the last year, we've increased the number of providers by about 10%, and until recently, the wait list has gone down significantly. The hiring freeze has affected some providers and is starting to allow the waiting list to increase. Different changes with how we handle spouses, the licensure back and forth has definitely helped with that. So overall, I think we're in an okay spot. We need to pay attention to the hiring freeze and like all my colleagues talked about, and make sure that we're not affecting sailors and their families.
Well, thank you. And on your way out, if you have other ideas on what you'd need from Congress to be able to address the child care shortage, please do let us know, because I know on a bipartisan basis, we're all very keen to do that. General Miller, I know that the Air Force has historically been very strong on child care. Have you had to make any changes to your child care program as a result of recent staffing changes?
Thank you, Congresswoman. Yes, we have actually. We've had to shift because of the hiring freeze and because the first round of DRP. A lot of our, not the direct child care providers, but some of the individuals that did the training in our child and youth. So we've had to shift some rooms around to make sure that we have coverage. We've had to shift some of our staffing in our child and youth programs into CDCs. Just to make sure that the CDCs are covered. We're working through, as we get through the summer, there's a lot of child and youth programs that we may have to decrease the hours that available. So we have had to make some modifications. What we're trying to do is have the least impact to the families, so there's still availability. The other thing that we have been doing is working the MyCAA, which is military child care in your community. So we have strengthened those relationships with the community. So if for whatever reason we're at capacity in our child care that they can go, we have facilities down in the community in which they can bring their child with some fee assistance. And then we have also tried to strengthen our FCCs, our family child care providers. And we were doing really well. Right now during PCS season, it's going down a little bit, but that's standard. But we've done a very big strategic push on, we've got to have the FCC families there. And that does also get after what Ms. Kelley brought up earlier is the 24-hour and just different programs. So thank you, ma'am.
Excellent. Thank you. And while I know the rest of you are not retiring, if you have other ideas on what you'd like us to be doing on childcare, like I said, I think on a bipartisan basis, we all want to make sure we're getting after this. I know Representative Kiggins and I represent sort of the two biggest consolidation of military assets in the country. So we hear about these things a lot. And on that note, in representing mostly the sailors and Marines in San Diego, obviously one issue that we've heard a lot about is from the many transgender service members. And while I know you all don't set policy, I did want to know either Admiral Cheeseman or General Borgschulte, if you've been able to meet with any of the sailors and Marines that have been impacted by these policies, and if there's anything you've been able to do to foster a command climate that supports all service members through these changes.
Congresswoman, thanks for the question. As you noted, we don't set policy, right? So we execute policy unemotionally. That being said, you asked a very specific question if I met with any transgender service members. I have not. I am confident that we have set a culture in the United States Navy of respect and trust and taking care of every shipmate, and that includes our transgender shipmates. This issue is currently under litigation, so I'd rather not speak anymore, if that's okay.
Understood.
Well, Ms. Jacobs, it's great to see you. If you remember, we cut the ribbon at Miramar.
Oh, I remember. We're so excited.
You remember? That was so really
It's
excited
still
about
only
that.
at like 68% capacity, though. That's why we got to fix the staffing.
It is true, and we're going to build another one there too. So I think as you know.
Excellent.
So I would say the exact same as Vice Admiral Cheeseman. Just we're very we don't set policy. We uphold the standards that we're given by our civilian leadership.
Awesome. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Crank for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it, and I apologize. I was in our Strategic Forces Subcommittee hearing, which is at the same time. General Eifler, last fall, soldiers at Fort Carson were failed by the Army. Every day, our junior enlisted rely on the services to provide adequate meals at on-base dining facilities, paid for by money taking out of their paychecks for basic allowance for subsistence. Yet at Fort Carson, according to a Military Times article, quote, troops reported being served food that was either improperly prepared or unavailable by the time they reached the end of the line. Kiosks intended to replace dining facilities in some circumstances with grab-and-go options are frequently empty, particularly during peak times when soldiers finish their shifts, unquote. I'm sure you'll agree with me that this was unacceptable and cannot be allowed to happen again at any military installation. An army that's not fed is an army that cannot fight. Can you tell me what was the root cause of these issues at Fort Carson?
Thanks for your concern on this. You're right, it is unacceptable, and those are, I believe, anomalies, but, sometimes we make mistakes, and we own up to it. I think it was a lack of forecasting with the return of forces from overseas in some cases, where they didn't anticipate more people coming into the dining facilities at that time, and I think that was the shortfall. So they didn't have enough, so they had to basically go make more food. Eventually, they sorted it out. But I'm confident that leadership there right now in the 4th Infantry Division of how they rectified that should not happen again. It's a sort of a leadership. It's an organizational. It's a model to make sure you forecast have enough food for everybody that's coming in. I think they just missed that.
Yeah, General Doyle has been a great commanding general at Fort Carson and a good friend, and I do agree that he's done a good job in handling that situation, but it was an unacceptable situation to begin with, so thank you. And then I guess just a quick follow-on to that. How can this subcommittee work with the Army to ensure on base dining facilities that they remain fully stocked to support our men and women in uniform?
Yeah, I think I appreciate what you guys are doing. I'm working with your staff back there on the back wall, what we're doing, especially with some pilot programs that we're looking at, much like privatized housing in a positive light, trying to do some privatizing in the dining facilities where we have a pilot program where, a private company gets a contract, owns the mess hall, the response, they get money that comes from the service members and those that eat in it. So it sort of encouraged them to cook good food and bring more soldiers in. So I think that's a win-win. We're working with some waivers to get contracts in to do that because Department of Education owns that. So we're working with the Secretary of Defense to sort of get a waiver to allow those contracts to come in place. We're trying to do that as early as this summer in about 5 locations. So I think that's one of the ways with your support to be able to get better, higher nutrition, better value for the money that we're putting inside of the dining facilities.
Great. Are there, and I would ask this for anyone on the panel, are there any new authorities that you would need from us or anything that we can do legislatively to help you in that mission?
Well, as I said, one of the things is this Department of Education owns the ability to make contracts. Mm-hmm. And so that's a thing that our secretary is going to ask the Secretary of Defense to get a waiver from the Department of Education so we can do this. So that I think any support for that would be probably the best thing. I don't know if there's another.
Yes, sir. I'd just like to comment. The food prices have gone up pretty significant over the last couple of years, right? So I think inflation, the contracts that come in are just, it's more expensive. So, you know, assistance in, like everything, the 10% pay raise is phenomenal. Now we're more expensive. So it's just, you know, fully funding the top line in the MPMC accounts and the manpower accounts, very helpful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for what you do. I appreciate it. You know, obviously taking care of the men and women who serve us in the military is important, and we want to support you in everything you do. And General, thank you for addressing this issue, and I just hope it never happens again. But thank you, sir. Yield back.
Thank you. And I believe we have time for another round of questions if you all are willing to accommodate. But I'd like to start just by Admiral Cheeseman, you mentioned medical waiver reviews as one of the things that the Navy especially was looking at. And I know that this is a source of personal frustration for me. I have had multiple parents come up to me who we gave Service Academy nominations to their children. They had taken anxiety medication for 6 months during COVID. It was no longer an issue, but they were denied, they were medically disqualified. When we a huge source of frustration as a nurse practitioner, we ask these kids to ask for mental health help, and then we penalize them. And it's not fair. Most recently, I've been on the phone several times this weekend with the DoD Medical Board staff. We have a young man who was given he had applied to West Point and was told he could not go to West Point because he was medically disqualified. He's in receipt of a Navy ROTC scholarship. He wants to be a Marine. And this young man was taken to the doctor. He was firstborn child. I've had a couple young sons myself. Ran around a lot in a classroom in Montessori school, wouldn't sit still. The mom was concerned and brought him to the doctor at the recommendation of the teacher, who said, oh, this kid might have a learning disability. He might have ADHD. So they wrote that down in his chart. He was never medicated. They switched him to public school. He thrived so well, so much so that we gave him a congressional nomination to West Point. And the parents never told the son, and he didn't even remember. So it's now that this has come up, you know, he's had a lot of questions. It's been a struggle for him, but he was reevaluated by our former governor, who was a pediatric neurologist in Virginia, who's also an Army veteran, who said this young man has no learning disability, obviously, no ADHD, just a slight remote history when he was 7. Not really documented, not really diagnosed, because even that medical record, I read it as a nurse practitioner, reviewed the entire chart, very inconclusive, very like the 7-year-old boy wouldn't sit still in class. And we will not let this young man be in the military. And I can't explain to you the source of personal frustration as the mother of a recent graduate from the Naval Academy and a mother of another senior at VMI, how that feels, raising sons and daughters and knowing what that feels like when I want to encourage my kids to be in the military. And these are good kids that want to serve our great country. You need them. And we're not letting them in because of this kind of stuff. So this problem needs to be fixed. And I am so not done fighting for this kid. And I'm happy to follow up with each and every one of you in this room to make sure that we give this person in particular. But the Dodmer process needs to be fixed. And thank you for mentioning Medical Review Board reform, but I just want to hear from you guys, because you guys, I hope, are communicating with this, but I am tired of having parents who have children who want to serve, and we don't let them serve because they ask for mental health help. These issues are resolved, or if they have a pediatric diagnosis that is not really validated, certainly not an issue. I mean, I have a son who I took to the doctor when he was 2 because he had a cold, and the doctor said, maybe asthma. That kid had to see a pulmonologist 3 times before he was able to graduate from the Naval Academy. It's wrong. It has to be fixed. So I'd like to hear from each of you about how we are fixing this Medical Review Board process.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of waivers, and the blessing and the curse of MHS Genesis allows us to see everything, and it also allows us to see everything. And I think we have increased our waivers, tenfold probably, to allow people in, like you're suggesting. I absolutely want to follow up with you on that, because I don't understand that either. That's something that we're looking at of changing. So we don't have these waivers for these big things. It's small things like you're talking about, things that happen in youth, and it's not necessarily medical either. There's people that have done small crimes and stuff that have been, that as they were a kid, was we call errors in youth, have made. But what we find longitudinally, they are not having a problem once they get in the military. Matter of fact, they're excelling. And so I absolutely want to work with you, but I know our USAREC, especially at a recruiting command, they are processing thousands of waivers this year because they see so much more. But those waivers are also getting approved, and we're very careful of that, but I definitely want to work with you, especially on this case.
The waiver process seems to be inconsistent. And talking to Dodmer, it seems like the service academies each have different things that they are accepting as waiverable, even including ROTCs are different, and what they assume is a waiverable condition. And they said that this was not a waiverable condition. So there's no consistency from what I am understanding, but happy to hear from.
Ma'am, thanks for the question. Very important issue, and I agree with you. At the outset, I would like to recognize the work that we've all done with OSD over the last couple of years to refine what those medical waivers should be. It can't be when you're 8 years old, you had an issue and therefore you cannot serve. There's been a large number of conditions where it's been something clinical in the last year or 3 years, depending on the issue. So it's important. The waiver process itself is cumbersome. If it's in the record anywhere, whether it's a current condition or not, it requires a waiver. So if you broke your arm when you're 8 playing soccer, you must get a waiver for that, even though you may be a state champion soccer player now, right, because it's in the record. So therefore, you're not perfectly clean. So that process, I think it comes down to risk tolerance. Where we have made strides in the Navy specifically is medical officers make recommendations, commanders make decisions. And if we think the sailor, the future sailor, poses no risk to themselves or the team at Great Lakes or in their first tour, then we're going to waive the condition and bring them on board. So that's how we've approached it. That's how we've refined ourselves. Our attrition rates are at all-time low. It's worth the risk going forward on these conditions as we make, educated decisions on the youth of America.
Thank you.
Again, like my colleagues, thanks for bringing this up. I have personal stories I won't, relay here, but the same type of personal stories where something that, these are the kids we want. These are the tough, gritty, who hadn't had a concussion, a contact sport. But I mean, these are the kids we want. And the waiver process it gotten better. It has improved. We have not seen. One of the intent of this was to have less attrition. We're not seeing a statistical less attrition with Genesis. So I just appreciate you bringing this up. For us, it's the Department of the Navy. My good friend here, Vice Adm Cheeseman, said he's going to fix this before he retires, or he can't retire. So it's all going to be worked out.
That's good news for us.
Yes, ma'am. It's the same in the Air Force. I work closely with General DeGoes, our SG, on these. And, to your point, some of these just are, they're unfathomable. It's like, okay, 7 years old, you shouldn't have to do it. And so we have some of the same issues, but we're working through the waivers, and it's just we need to streamline that process. It is cumbersome to do it, but we're doing it because we want these individuals to serve in the Air Force.
It needs to be reformed.
Ma'am, I'll just add that I think the overall DoD level discussion is the right one to have. The consistency is a challenge. The waivers are helping us through it, but time-consuming, cumbersome, and they lead to inconsistency. From the Space Force perspective, we have a very different way and different model that people are serving in. And so there's some flexibility there, and what we've tried to do is signal to the Department of Defense that there's probably some flexibility to open the aperture here.
It's a new passion project, so thank you very much. With that, I yield to my ranking member.
Sign me up, because I have the same number of stories, and many of my kids' friends and many of my family members have experienced the same kind of just mind-boggling discrimination, I think, on these issues. And so if there's something we can do to help reform this. I've seen the same thing with the Uniformed Services University as well. So it's broader than this stage right here. I'm going to try to ask what amounts to 3 questions in 4.5 minutes. But in one of them, I just want to know, is it true? Like, this is one of these salacious rumors that a member of Congress wants to know if the answer is true. With the executive order on DEI, I have heard that there is no longer a requirement and that data is being stripped of things like minority identification, whether gender, race, those kinds of things, ethnicity, and that it's going to be not monitoring those kinds of things. And so my question is, first of all, is that true? Second of all, if it is true, how will we ever know if women are not coming into the military as abundantly as they were before all of this was going on, if we're not following those kinds of things? How will we ever know if people are being turned off by joining the military if we are not tracking their ethnicity or their race in the way that we normally would have? Tell me it's not true.
I'm not tracking that. I don't think that's true.
Okay.
Just as you indicated, we know that we have about 16,000 women in the Army. We know that 41% increase of women coming into the Army this last year. So we are still tracking that. I think the things that we were asked to look at was on merit-based promotions, that we're not considering those things. So I don't think that we were told not to track any of that.
Ma'am, same thing for the Navy. Sex, race, and ethnicity is still tracked.
If the answer is yes across the board, I'll save my time. Okay, great. The next question that I have, though, is that there has to be a way that we are looking or trying to measure what I think will be a oppressive reaction that with firings of generals and flag officers who don't have any performance issues as near as anybody can tell, but maybe women or maybe people of color. This has to have an oppressive impact on people. How will we ever measure that, or can we measure that? If we put it in the NDAA, do you feel like you still have the data to be able to do that?
Congresswoman, I'll answer that question from the Navy perspective. So I've recently pulled recruiting and retention data. I live this. I look at it all the time, but specifically to this question. And while there have been firings in the past, there's no impact, no causal impact of retention or recruiting for any subset of sailors going forward.
So if we ask in the NDAA for a report on this, you feel like that you're maintaining and monitoring the data that you would need to be able to see that?
100%, yes, ma'am.
Okay, my last question is actually a complete change of gears, and it's for regarding the NRO and the Air Force and Space Force folks. We had this conversation. The Space Force is responsible, as near as I understand it, for putting in some number of billets into the NRO. My understanding from our conversation, Ms. Kelley, is that the Space Force has struggled with that and has asked the Air Force to be supportive of that. And you and I had that conversation as well, General Miller, that you had been in conversation about that. And we both, all three of us, not on the same call, but talked about whether or not you could get some data about what that impact is and whether or not how many billets are being left unfilled and whether or not there's a way to reprioritize those, because in the interim, the NRO is without staffing that is, I would assume, necessary.
Ma'am, thank you for the question, and thank you for the conversation last week. The Space Force is staffing the NRO at 80% right now, and that's been consistent over the last several years. So we haven't had a significant reduction in the overall staffing. But what we have had is a challenge trying to meet that number and the emerging mission requirements that are being levied on the Space Force. So it's not so much a billet issue from our perspective, it's a people problem, trying to make sure that we continue to staff the NRO and validate what they need as well as what we need to do to emerge. The thing that I think is really important that sometimes gets lost in the conversation is all of the agreements to staff the NRO predate the stand-up of the Space Force. And so what we've done with the Air Force in partnership and the NRO is come together over the last I guess, 5 months or so, and figure out how do we continue to staff the NRO going forward to make sure they have what they need and that the services continue to have the right trained guardians that can be supported over there.
Thank you. I yield.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Cisneros for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I want to ask about the Brandon Act. It was something that was passed by Congress, signed into policy at DOD, and put down to the services. I've remained pretty close with the Caserta family. This has become a passion project of theirs. You know what the Brandon Act is, right? Is if there's a service member who's having difficulties with mental health and needs help, they're able to go to their chain of command and just basically say, Brandon Act, I need help. And the chain of command is supposed to get them that help. But we're still hearing stories about, you know, enlisted service members, I guess junior officers not knowing what that is, chain of command not familiar with what the Brandon Act is, or if they have heard about it, not really what they're supposed to do if somebody comes to them. It's been a few years now. So how are we implementing this? How are we training and informing our service members, and how are we working with the chain of command, especially our commanding officers, so that they know how to react? And I should include our senior NSO or NCOs too as well, that if someone comes to them and says Brandon Act, how do they get the wheels in motion and make sure that service member is going to be taken care of? And since Vice Admiral, since Brandon was a sailor, I'll start with you.
Yes, sir. Thanks for the question. Very important issue and something we cannot take our foot off the gas on. Brandon Act for us and the responsibility to take care of another sailor is part of our accession pipelines. It is part of our leadership schools. So folks are trained to this over time. I don't think we can ever stop training to it because there's constant turnover in the force. We're bringing in 40,000 people this year. Roughly 30 to 35,000 people leave every year. So it's a constant, training as people move into the service, up through the ranks, and then out of the service. Specific to our approach, we developed a mental health playbook a number of years ago that has these types of things in it, and it has a back cover that talks about just this kind of thing for responses to these kinds of scenarios. So we redouble down all the time with our chain of command, with our operational commanders to make sure we keep doing this training, and we won't stop, sir.
Do we have a program, and this is for all the services, really, how are we advertising this? Are we playing it, are we putting billboards or flyers out there, like in the exchange and the commissaries? Are we advertising in an Armed Forces radio or Armed Forces television, or you're overseas? How do we kind of keep ingraining it rather than them just getting it maybe once a year when they come in, or maybe just when they come in, or when they're at a commanding officer school? How do we kind of keep this constantly going so that it's constantly being refreshed in everybody's mind?
I'll take this one. So to Admiral Cheeseman, it's the same thing. It's continual training at all the different areas and responsibilities. But to your point, we in the Department of the Air Force, we don't have a strategic communication plan on this particular thing. And I think that we absolutely need to, because we talk about getting mental health, making sure that that's part of resilience. And it's important. And if someone says, I need it, we need to have individuals at all levels respond to that appropriately. And so, as you bring it up, I'm thinking that we definitely have it in some of our schoolhouses, but I don't think we have it at every level, and that is the problem. So I think that I took a note down that we need to do a better on our strategic communication plan.
And I think that is the problem there, right? Or things that, and we'll have to hear if everybody agrees that, we can do better communicating that and make sure that it's not just at the training, but it's constantly being seen. You go to some of the exchanges and stuff, and you see like, hey, the no smoking things are like the things about if you want to quit smoking, right? Trying to get people, and Admiral, I was a sailor too, right? I think the Navy has done a great job of really kind of trying to get people off of tobacco, and it was during a constant, flowing message, and able to do that. And so I'm hoping we can do the same thing with mental health and the Brandon Act there. Just real quick, and I don't think I have enough time for you to answer this, so I'll take this one for the record. But I would love to hear more about how we can keep people. We spend a lot of money training individuals, whether it be cybersecurity, intelligence, linguistics, and this happens in all the services, and I would constantly hear these stories. They go into these jobs, they're there for 3 or 4 years, and then boom, they're off somewhere else. And you know, I remember the commandant, you know, General Smith, talking about, well, if you want to get promoted and doing things and move up the ranks in the Marine Corps, you have to go and do other things. But I would love to see it, and if we can get plans of, like, you know, if people are in the band, you're in the band. That's it. And we spend a lot of money training people to be in cybersecurity, to be linguistics, to teach them Russian and Mandarin. And why are we only letting them do it? And as soon as they start to get good, we're sending them somewhere else to do something else. How can we create a pipeline that would just kind of keep them in their field and allow them to still promote and be successful? I would love to hear your thoughts on that, and I'll take that one for the record. And with that, thank you all for being here today.
Thank you. And the chair now recognizes Ms. Jacob for 5 minutes.
Thank you. So one of the things that we got in last year's NDA was a feasibility study on apartment-style housing for families that could include a child care center. We're still waiting on that feasibility study, so just a flag for your ledge affairs folks. We are tracking that it is late. But also would love to hear from you if you think innovative housing options like this could improve the quality of life for our service members. Obviously, you know, I can tell you, we hear from them all the time that if they knew they were getting their housing right away, they would be fine with it being multifamily housing, especially if it meant they're at a child care center right below and they could walk to base and not have to deal with all of the traffic at the one gate at Naval Base San Diego. But, you know, would really love to hear from you what you think of something like that. And whoever wants to respond.
Congresswoman, I'll go first. You know, the Navy's working hard to make sure no sailor has to sleep where they work. And core to that is, you know, moving off the ship, moving away from their unit during their free time. A tiered strategy here in an effort to, you know, whether it's unaccompanied housing, privatized housing like you talk about, public-private venture, those types of things. I'm confident that CNIC and the Enforced Resource Sponsor has a plan. What will be very helpful here is authorization for an increased partial BAH. That will entice privatized folks to work with us to be able to provide these options that you speak of. So all in on those types of things, I think it'll be very helpful, you know, going forward, because, you know, we owe a commitment to our sailors so they do not have to sleep where they work.
Not to give my Republican colleagues any too much credit, but that partial BAH approval was in the reconciliation bill, so it might be coming soon.
Thank you.
Did anyone else want to add to that?
Well, I'll just say, you know, innovative approach. I like the concept. I think when you just out at Miramar, when we were there together, you know, when you ask Marines, young Marines, what they want to do, they want to live out in town at times. The rank matters, though. The ones that have proven that they can go out in town and execute like a great American citizen, awesome. Some we're still working on, our more junior Marines, that might need a little more supervision, so the barracks are... punching walls is not good. We frown upon that. But I do think that there's something there. And when you talk to Marines about retention, you know, with our good Marines, we actually have a couple of 200 Marines that we allowed to live out in town, sergeants, and they really appreciate that. That kept some of them in. So I appreciate any innovative approach to make it, you know, the quality of life better, which equals retention, which, like I said, equals lethality and warfighting excellence.
Absolutely. One other question for you, Admiral Cheeseman. We've heard some really good feedback on the deployment resiliency counselors that serve on the ships. We've also heard mixed reviews of some sailors who didn't know they were on the ships or that they had access to it. But I was wondering if you could speak to that program, how you see its role in supporting sailors' health, and, you know, if you've seen any plans of cutting back that service.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for the question. So I have seen no plans on cutting back that service. I think when you speak to sailors who may not understand that they're there, they're primarily on aircraft carriers or big deck amphibs and not on small ships. So when destroyers and cruisers or small amphibs deploy, they may become disaggregated from that service. So it really takes leadership engagement. If they see a sailor that could use some to set up a virtual meeting or such, but no plans to reduce that core capability. It's pretty important.
Excellent. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. And in lieu of a closing statement, I just have a closing question that I'd like each of you to answer. But General, you talked about restoring this value of service in our country, and I'm just curious if you could each maybe give just a word or two about why do young people join the military in this day and age? What is it that is motivating our youth to step up and want to serve their country?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think there's a multitude of reasons. I can't speak on behalf of all of them. There's still an interest for the GI Bill, which is one of the best things out there for as far as the American dream, as I consider it in the military. Being able to do that is very helpful. Also, the lure of coming into profession and serving, as Mike mentioned earlier, serving something bigger than yourself. There's a lot of people want to be a part of a team. And so that still is inspiring. It's not so much as incentives and bonuses. It's the same thing, sir, that you mentioned to keep these highly skilled personnel, low density personnel in. They love to do what they signed up to do. The more we can have them do that and get them in to do that, the more satisfied and fulfilled they are. And so that's what we're looking for on our end to make sure they're doing it. But a lot of them are want to serve their country. They want to do some of these things that they can't do out in the civilian world.
Thank you.
Congresswoman, great question. The average age of a new sailor in our Navy is 22 years old, so they're not fresh out of high school. They're finding the Navy a better place for them than in the outside world. Sometimes that's pay, sometimes that's bonuses, sometimes that's housing or education or medical care, but it's to what my colleague said. It is core to the mission. It's the sense of purpose, the sense of getting something done. They want to do the job, ma'am. That's why they're here.
Great, thank you.
Again, thanks very much for asking this, because I think our national narrative has got to champion this. You know, in these hearings, we talk a lot about we're fixers, right? There's things that we need to fix. So we talk about things we need to fix. But that narrative becomes kind of negative. And I think when we talk about the fantastic value of serving something bigger than self, that's why we all stay in. That's why all of us could go do other things, right? And same for you. But I think, specifically for the Marine Corps, I think it's our high standards. We tell, we're fairly confident in our high standards, and we challenge young Americans to be Marines. And sometimes we tell them, I don't think you can do it. And that's why I'm going to, at the same time, I challenge you. And, this is an interesting fun fact. Only 50% of our force is on a bonus for retention. That's pretty amazing. I'm not sure that's, the way it is in other areas. But, well, I would, sure, and you can tell, right? That's just inculcated. And I think our high standards.
I'll take his money.
Which we say, hey, if you're going to come to the Marine Corps, you're going to fight. Every Marine does martial arts. Every Marine shoots from 500 yards, a weapon, semi-automatic weapon. Doesn't matter if you're male, female, whatever. Every Marine's going to run 3 miles. Every Marine's going to carry somebody over their shoulder and run through an agility course. I mean, I can go on and on. I know they love it. But I think it's our high standards is what attracts really high-performing Americans to our brand.
And never lower those standards.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
It's so fun to follow you. At least he didn't offer to carry you around like he did when we were in the Senate hearing, which was awesome. But I would say for us, it's most of the airmen that I talk to, it's either to travel, get out of where they are, or it's education. And then, once they get into the service, our retention rates are nearing 90%. And so they fall in love with the mission, and they fall in love with what they do, and they fall in love with serving. So that's why I think that we're attractive to the service.
Thank you.
Ma'am, I would just offer on the Space Force side, the unbelievably booming tech world that we all find ourselves living in, coupled with the same thing specific for space, attracts the best and the brightest, both officer, enlisted, and civilian. We're capitalizing on that. It's the brand cachet that my colleagues have talked about uniquely for their services, and then making sure that that experience actually matches what they're promised, because that's what makes them stay.
Good. And we need to keep those guys too. So I'd like to thank all of our witnesses again for their service and for providing testimony this afternoon. With that, there being no further business, this subcommittee stands adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you so much.